Welcome to the Two Disabled Dudes podcast. We believe life is about how we react. The Marfan Foundation is currently celebrating 40 years of service to patients and families affected by Marfan syndrome and other related conditions. We had the honor of participating in the 36th annual conference with a virtual discussion featuring 4 panelists who have each been significantly affected by rare disease. Marfan syndrome is a genetic condition that affects the body's connective tissue. Connective tissue helps to hold the body's cells, organs, and tissues together and also helps to control how the body grows and develops. There are several disorders related to Marfan that cause people to struggle with the same or similar physical problems, and anyone affected by these conditions needs an early and accurate diagnosis. Please visit marfan.org for more information. As you'll hear, Marfan syndrome, VEDS, and LDS are just a sample of the conditions being represented in this discussion today. Leah, Adrianna, Kristy, and Micah share openly about their vastly different experiences, but also their shared and wildly optimistic, fulfilling lives despite the challenges and unpredictability of their conditions. This conversation spoke to us in many different ways, and we hope something in this recording will speak to you too. Our podcast is really based on the overall theme of living life beyond circumstances. We know that we're all going to face hard things in life, whether it's an illness or disease or financial hurdles or lost jobs or whatever it may be. We're all going to have rough days. And we believe whether you're living with FA or Marfans or VEDS or LDS or just maybe a really bad toothache, we all have the ability to control our reactions and how we respond to the things happening in our world. We all have the ability to play the cards we were dealt. And that's really what comes to life on our podcast. And we couldn't be more excited to join the Marfan Foundation today and interview some amazing panelists that we'll get to in just a moment.
This concept of living beyond circumstances is especially relevant in the context of the Marfan Foundation because Marfan and VEDS and LDS are genetic cousins, if you will. And there's a lot of shared experiences. And so we'd like to dive into those today, and we've put together an incredible panel. First of all, we want to have the panel introduce themselves. So, Leah, we're going to start with you. Tell us a little bit about you.
Sure. My name is Leah Hall. I live in Montclair, New Jersey with my husband and our little Jack Russell Terrier. I was diagnosed with Loeys-Dietz syndrome at the age of 30. So about 14 years ago. My mother had what they believed to be Marfan syndrome, but actually they diagnosed her with that because they didn't have a name for Loeys-Dietz syndrome at that time when she had it. She died about at the age of 30. And I now know that her father, my grandfather, had it as well. So yeah, that's kind of my story.
Thank you, Leah. And Kristy, would you tell us a little about yourself?
Hi, yes, I'm Kristy Poseval, and I have vascular Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. I live in Baltimore, Maryland. I've been here 7 years because of their emergency room. Prior to that, I was in Chicago for 18 years, and I was diagnosed at age 5.
Thank you. And Micah, how about you?
So I'm Micah Emner Clark, and I live in upstate New York, in the Rochester area, with my wife and 2 kids. I have Marfan syndrome, and I was diagnosed when I was in kindergarten, so very young. Actually, when I was growing up in Alaska, and during that time, I was the only kid in the entire state that had Marfan's. And then when I was in middle school, my family moved to Wisconsin. And then I went to college in Boston where I met my wife. And we had our first child who actually has Marfan's as well. And then we made our way over to Rochester. So that's where we are now. And we just are celebrating 3 weeks with our newborn, our second child.
Wow. Congratulations. That's amazing.
Thank you. Yeah. Very exciting.
Thank you, Micah. How about Adrianna? Would you introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you. My name is Adrianna Rivera. I live in Miami, Florida with my husband and a beagle baby. And I was diagnosed as an infant in my native Puerto Rico, where I was born and raised. My father had Marfan's. I have Marfan's. My father had Marfan's. But he was never diagnosed and he never received treatment. It wasn't until I was diagnosed that, we looked at all of the descriptions, not we, because I was a baby, but they looked at all of the descriptions and whatnot and were like, okay, he has to have it. But he never received treatment even after that. And he passed away when he was 38. So I'm now 35. So I'm almost at the age where he passed. And I am living life to the fullest.
All right. We're gonna dig into your story a little more, and we're gonna ask each of you questions about how you're living life beyond circumstances. Leah, I want to start with you. And my understanding with all of these conditions is that there's a lot of unpredictability. So how do you stay on track with your life in the face of such uncertain circumstances?
That's a great question. I've been fortunate to not have too many issues where I couldn't manage my day-to-day life. The thing that always seems to knock me off track is the surgeries. There's no symptoms. There's no, you're getting sicker and sicker until you go into the doctor. It kind of just starts to happen. And I've had emergency surgeries where I thought I had the flu, but it was actually a AAA that was necessary. So in this emergency room, thinking I was getting a muscle relaxer, they're like, no, you're having surgery and that's it. And then you have to get all the pieces in line. So for me, it's, reaching out to my employer and telling them that I'm having the surgery and they don't know what that means. And then once the surgery is over, kind of regrouping and saying, okay, now what needs to take place for the next 6 weeks in life? And that's life, my personal life, that's my professional life. So that's kind of been the one thing that's been I've had to manage, I would say, since getting diagnosed. And the surgeries, I've had about 4 or 5 in the last 14 years. I'm waiting for one now. The one I'm waiting for is planned, so that's a little better. But now there's insurance issues I have to deal with. So it's always going to be a little something. And what is great about this panel discussion, this conference, is that there are other people who are going through the same thing. I don't know anyone, I don't have any friends that have Marfan's or Loeys Dietz. And so people that I know, it's just kind of odd to have these major surgeries every couple of years or without warning. So they don't get it. And that's understandable. Other than that, I would say that I take my medication. I go to Johns Hopkins to get monitored every year. I have a great network of doctors, not only at Johns Hopkins, but here in New Jersey, that are in constant communication. And so because of that great network, I think I've been very fortunate to just have some of the best minds that are just like my team. And so when I go see one, they all get notified, they all get the notes, and they can all kind of just say, what's the next best step if there's one needs to be taken.
You speak to the power of community. When you talk about being able to connect with people at events like this. And I'm thankful that things like this are able to take place and that we're all able to be a part of it, right? Because when you feel like a fish out of water, it's really hard to get bogged down into the hard stuff. But when you're able to connect with even one or two other people that have a somewhat of an inkling of what you're going through, that really helps everybody rise beyond those challenges that we all face.
Oh, for sure. And then this is my first conference. So, just imagine if I had been diagnosed earlier or known or had, any inkling of this going on, or had known of the people that had these conditions that I could work, talk to and reach out to. I think I could be even further along than I am now.
I'll give it up to you for A, being your first conference, and B, being a part of the conversation. That's a way to jump right in there, Leah. I love that. You and Adrianna both mentioned something that I don't want to get too far away from. So I want to go to Adrianna with it, but Leah, I want to come back to you with this question too. We'll just give you a moment to regroup your thoughts. Adrianna, you mentioned specifically that you're nearing the age where your father had passed away. And I'm curious how that impacts your mindset today. I imagine there's a sense of grief there for him and even for yourself. So can you walk us through what that might mean for you, or how that impacts you?
Oh, I wasn't ready for that one. Yeah, it's not easy. I know that I will definitely surpass him because I have been, in treatment for my whole life. And I have a great team of doctors, just like Leah mentioned, that makes such a huge difference. Not only that, but I am a very strong self-advocate. Like, I will raise my hand. I will tell you what I need and when I need it. So advocating for yourself is also huge. And having also the family. My father didn't have that. So my mom is like a rock star mom. And, I can't thank her enough for everything she did for me. And all of those components just really came together so that I have such a different outlook than what he ever could have had. I think even if he would have been diagnosed, it's just those components were never there for him, like the family component, the self-advocating component. So it's really powerful to have all those things and to know how to use them to further your life and your health. But it's definitely going back to your question. Even when you asked me, it just I was like, ooh, hold it together, girl. Because it's not easy. And, I don't know what I'm going to do when I actually turn 38. It's going to be emotional, definitely. But yeah, when I turn 39, that will be even bigger.
So, Micah, with this conversation, you mentioned to us in an earlier conversation that you didn't even think you were going to make it past 25. When you were young, your vision was just, I won't make it past 25. And so how does it feel to outlive that thought?
Yeah. So, I mean, my scenario kind of, just adds on to what has already been talked about the circumstances that exist today around us and our community. And that can be the connections with the foundation or with the medical community, having the knowledge that they have now compared to the knowledge that they had when I was growing up with Marfans. Is light years difference. It's such a dramatic change in such a short period of time too. So when I was growing up with Marfans, it was pretty much you really, the life expectancy was really low. And so I just kind of had that that was what the expectation was, because that was just kind of how it was at the time, and where we've come so far since then. But like, growing up, I just never really expected to make it that far. And that was going to be what my story was going to be. So with those cards, I never really had the expectation of doing some of these major life events, like meeting a significant other and getting married and then having children and pursuing like this professional career. Like, these things were not really in the cards for me. But then due to like the innovations in healthcare, the connections in communities such as these, the relationships that develop, like I just, have continued to persevere and flourish. And I hope to keep on going. But my mentality really is like everything that I'm doing at this point is kind of borrowed time, like all these things. I never set out with any kind of expectation or, personal like vision of myself here, but yet here I am. So I have to take advantage of every moment. It's all free given time. So that's what kind of keeps me going.
I think that's a really neat perspective. Gratitude. I think that everyone can agree that that's an important part. And if you're grateful for every moment because you didn't even think you were going to live till 25, I think that's a really neat perspective to share with everybody.
Can I add to that? My father died in the kitchen one night, and I was 5 years old. And then, my mom was frantic and hysterical and on the phone with 911, and EMT came and resuscitated him. And it was kind of like a really violent event because they broke some of his ribs, and he died 2 weeks later in the hospital, and they diagnosed him with VEDS during his autopsy. And then I was diagnosed with VEDS after that. So watching him die from the disease you're then diagnosed with is so, the trajectory of your life, like, just totally changes. And it's just nothing you're prepared for or can understand. And the hole that's left is so monumental. You don't know if you're going to get through it. And as I was diagnosed and my mom lost her husband at 31, she never recovered. So I was kind of left in the dark with my diagnosis. And I definitely did not think I was going to live very long. And doctors, all of them told me never to have children, you'll die, and never take a gym class, you'll die. And it's very negative. And there was no community. There was no internet. There was nobody to talk to. So I second all of this. Like, it's so amazing to have each other and to meet other people with VEDS and other people with related conditions. And I'd also like to say I just turned 47 in March. And at 31, when I reached my dad's age, it was so sad and devastating and strange. And now to be 16 years out, I just am so happy to have this life. And it's so sad that he didn't get that life. Like, it's just devastating. The more I age, the more you realize what he lost. So,
well, thank you for sharing that. A happy birthday. Although I will say, you're aging yourself when you say there was no internet. But Leah, I want to give you a chance to add into this overall concept.
Yeah, thank you, because I couldn't find how to raise my hand. So for Micah and for Kristy, as a child growing up with this, because I wasn't diagnosed until I was a full adult. So I oftentimes wonder, had I known what would be different? What would I do differently if I didn't think I was going to live to see these milestones, like, getting married, having kids, and being a professional? Do you think this affected just your? I know it did, but how? If you can pinpoint it, how did it affect your schooling and going after an education or things like that? I'm just curious to know.
So I grew up with it, right? But the knowing of what it is one thing, but knowing what comes along with it is another. And that understanding of like what your disease entails is still a relatively new thing, because, I knew, and I don't want to speak for Kristy, but like we knew what Marfan's was at a relatively young age, but we didn't really know what that entailed. Like we didn't know all of the surgeries that would be required. We didn't necessarily like at that time, there wasn't like these markers that you would necessarily follow for like your aortic arch growth and those kind of things. That knowledge might have existed in smaller circles, but it wasn't as widely dissipated as it is today. So while we did know about my diagnosis of Marfan's, and there were things that we could do, like I came out of contact sports at a young age, and there were things that we did, and I struggled through school and got special assistance because of my Marfan's, and I did have that magical name that I could blame things on, right? It's not just like, oh, you're just tall and skinny because that's who you are. It's like, no, well, there's this thing called Marfan's that makes me this way. And as a teenager, it's you have this thing, this imaginary creature that you can blame everything on. So having that, was a blessing and a curse, because like you knew what it was and you got to blame on it, but you also like, because of it, it impacted your life in this way that at the time was totally devastating, right? Like to get pulled out of sports, when you're a teenage boy, that's a big thing. And I'm sure, the same thing would be for girls as well. Like, at that age, everything is devastating. So, yeah. So it did impact it. But I don't know if it had, any true saying as to, if I would have, the life that I have today, because I was diagnosed. But I will say, like, for my kids, and I can speak for them, like we know these things to look for. So my, what helps me sleep at night is knowing that for them, they're not going to have the same experiences that I did when I was growing up, because we now know those things exist. That knowledge has been dissipated. This community exists of support. So,
yeah, it was devastating is the word. And because I'm not tall and don't look different, people thought I was anorexic. They thought I was a princess. They thought I was very demanding. They didn't, there's not a lot of like patience for people who have a pre-existing condition that they can't say the name of. I mean, and there was a lot of less than. I felt less than, and I had nobody. Like my mom was in bed for years after my dad died, and so I had to navigate everything myself. And I have an amazing independence streak that probably started around that age, because I had to advocate for myself medically. I had to do a lot of things, get out of gym class, etc., sports. So it's just so. I mean, like suicide thinking started around 11. Secret cutting happened in middle school. I mean, there was just such a, I am different and I am less than, and nobody is like me. I mean, not one person. So it had a big impact on my self-esteem, I'd say.
Thank you for sharing it. And I appreciate how open you guys are. I know we all, there are 100 different ways to walk through this life, right? If not a million. And I appreciate you guys being so honest. Speaking of, everybody having maybe a different place in their diagnosis or their journey, I would like to ask, Leah mentioned it and we've talked about it briefly, but how is the Marfan community as a whole, how has that helped you overcome your circumstances? I would love to throw this one to Adrianna just to help keep the conversation in light of everything we're up against and all those different hurdles that we've all touched on. How has the community or the organization helped move you along in your journey?
I only learned about the Marfan Foundation when I moved to Miami And the first time I met somebody else with Marfans was at the first conference that I went to in, I believe, Minneapolis. And, afterwards, the best thing is just knowing that you're not alone. Just knowing that there's more people. Because it's, when you say to other people this or that, and they say, I understand. No, you don't. You don't. I thank you for the sentiment, but you don't understand. You can empathize, but you really don't understand. And I wanted to add something from before when Kristy was talking about, all of the unseen hurt and the unseen pain. Just 2 words: mental health. We go to a cardiologist, and we go to a geneticist, and we go here and we go there, but we really, mental health really needs to also be key, from as soon as childhood all the way to adulthood. We really we need to take care of our mental health. It's really important.
I agree. I think you teed it up perfect there for Leah. In an earlier conversation, Leah shared quite a bit about her journey with therapy and how getting some of that professional help in her life has been valuable. And I know mental health isn't always attached to therapy, but in this case, Leah shared pretty openly about that. So Leah, can you talk to us about what you found to be powerful in that part of the journey for you?
Completely. So I didn't start therapy for Loeys-Dietz syndrome or having it. But I have grown to appreciate my therapist with regard to dealing with having Loeys-Dietz, and also dealing would be the word, but also what that means for relationships around me. So, getting diagnosed as an adult when your mother died and her father died from it, and not one person in your family does anything about it for you, can make you feel a certain way. I would call it angry and bitter, and there's sadness with that, right? So I deal with that with my therapist, and he helps me to deal with those emotions, but still be productive and, kind of separate what's the emotion from what the reality is and things of that nature. But I would agree with Adrianna. It's an ongoing thing. It's part of that circle of doctors in your network, right? So you go see your cardiologist, you go see my vascular surgeon. I see all these people, but I cannot stop seeing my therapist, because I would not make it if I had no one to talk to about how I'm dealing with having Loeys-Dietz syndrome, especially considering it's so new to me. Getting diagnosed at the age of 30, right after getting married, has threw my life into a tailspin. And no one's equipped to talk about that or deal with that, who's not, one, going through it themselves or trained to talk to people about their emotions and how they're dealing with things. I think mental or emotional therapy, talking to someone, a psychologist, is paramount to getting through these illnesses.
I've seen therapists at different points in my life. I definitely saw one as a child. I remember it vividly, the space, the room with the low lighting and the toys, and having to talk about my anger and stuff. I don't remember if it was helpful, but then I tried again in college. I was really struggling in college and had a little help. And then as an adult, I definitely was able to find some more help in the mental health arena for myself and advocate better for that. And one thing that we've identified, and this is for everybody, I've identified my own issues, but one thing that I identified that I think a lot of people struggle with is something I call catastrophic thinking. And when you have something wrong with your vascular system, for example, a pain means you should probably go to the emergency room. It could also be really bad gas. So it could be terribly embarrassing if you're in the emergency room for 8 hours and you have gas, or the pain goes away and you go home. But catastrophic thinking helps you get yourself to the hospital or the emergency room to make sure you make it through the event you may be having. But catastrophic thinking seeps in everywhere, and it's very hard to recognize. And one place where I started to recognize it was when I first got my kittens. They're now 19 and 16 years old, but I still do it. And when they sleep so soundly, I assume they've died, and I need to go shake them and see if they're awake. And it's just such a dramatic, like, they must be dead. My mind goes right there. And I've noticed that I have this dramatic thinking throughout a lot of things. So you never know where the mental bumps are going to arise and come up. But it's just one area where I've gotten help, and it's helped me a lot.
So, Kristy, you talk about this catastrophic thinking, and, we've heard about all these incredible hurdles and loss that everybody's dealt with, but you literally have not stopped smiling the entire time. So what's up with that? How do you explain that? Because, we're talking about really tough stuff and really, really deep things, and you're just smiling through it all. What's up with that?
It's true. I'm a naturally happy person. It gets really annoying at times because sometimes it's not a good day, but I just am so happy to be alive and so happy that our VEDS community and all of our communities are thriving and trying to find each other and find our place in the world. Like, this is so special to be on this panel and to be talking to peers or people younger than me, trying to know if they're going to be all right. And yeah, if you just keep focusing on what you can do instead of what you can't do, the limitations, you find a good path. You really can find a good path.
A positive mind frame is really powerful. And also, like, mental health doesn't mean that you have to go to a therapist if that's not your thing. Like, it could be journaling, it could be bike riding, it could look like whatever you want it to look like to put you in that mental state of positivity and happiness.
So for me, like, this idea about living beyond your circumstance speaks to me, because my entire life I've always tried to not necessarily let my condition define who I was or what I can do. So I never really tried to let it put limits on my capability. And that goes into it's a whole outlook on life. And I smile all the time too. I'm a generally positive person. I'm always looking at the brighter side of things, regardless of all the hurdles that have come up and, medically wise, the surgeries, the emergency room visits, the having to take years off of school to recover from surgeries, having to change career paths, all that stuff. Sometimes I refer to it as just being stubborn, but truly it's having a mindset of living beyond your condition and not letting your condition define who you are, right? Like, I have Marfans, but Marfans does not dictate my life, right? Like, yeah, I'm not a star basketball player, or, I don't play, I'm not a downhill skier, or I don't do all these other things. I'm not a NASCAR driver, but, I still am a wonderful person. I still have a terrible sense of humor. I'm still all kinds of quirky, but I don't let that dictate me, and I don't live in the confines of my day-to-day discomfort or pain, or just because, the surgeries come up or the emergency room visits come up, I don't shut down, right? I'll take time off, but then I'm right back into it. And for me, that's been not letting my disease define who I am.
I'm going to say that you're probably a normal person because you're not a NASCAR driver. No offense to the NASCAR fans in the room. But Leah, please, cut you off.
No, I was going to say, I agree with Mike. If I'm asked to introduce myself or tell my story, I don't say that I have low seat syndrome. It's not part of my story. I just started a class last week, and they said, introduce yourself. And it was kind of what you do, right? This is who I am. This is where I live. Here's my professional background. And that was pretty much it. And so, I would agree with that 100%. I think the one thing that has caused me difficulties is I work in a very competitive environment, and one in which you need to be available at all times. And so we take off 6 weeks unexpectedly. It tends to, and you can't get fired for a condition. There's laws around that, I know, but it definitely puts it gives concern to your employer when they're looking at who's to promote or who to put in charge of projects. They want someone who is consistent, and that's been difficult for me. But there's, but you just have to your point, you have to keep living. You have to keep going beyond that and not kind of focusing too much on that one piece, because there's going to be hurdles in life for everyone. But that's been definitely one for me that's affected me in my career since this whole thing, all these surgeries have come up.
So is there a specific mindset or technique, or I don't know, something you do that helps you be a good employee when there's, questions about it? Like what advice would you have for somebody else with Loeys Dietz that wants to have a steady career?
I'm still working through it. I'm a hard worker. So, it's in a recent example, one of my surgeries that was unexpected. I was working on something. I was literally still texting from the emergency room, and they had given me painkillers, and my texts and emails were gibberish. And my husband's like, okay, no more texting for you. This is done. You're done. You're not working anymore because you can't even put a straight email out. But I am a very, very hard worker. And if they can't understand, and just to add to that, I think when it comes to conditions you can't see, like Loeys Dietz syndrome, and I don't mean to belittle any other disease out there, but there are illnesses where everyone knows that illness. And as soon as someone says they have it, they're like, oh, we get it. You're going to need time off. It's going to be this. And it's just it's an easy path. But when you say you have Loeys Dietz syndrome, first of all, what is Loeys Dietz syndrome? And it's like, well, how long have you known you had Loeys Dietz syndrome? And did you know you had it before you came to work here? All these things come up. And it's a weird position to be in, because there's nothing that says I have Loeys Dietz syndrome. There's no look. There's not enough education or there's not a lot of information about it. It's not one of those things where you say it and everyone's like, oh yeah, I know my cousin had that or whatever. So for me, it's just, I love what I do. So I just do the best at it that I can. And if those situations come up and those surgeries come up, there's nothing I can do about it. I just have to rely on the fact that I've been the best employee I can be up until that point. And I'll come back after these 6 weeks and I'll get right back to it. And that's got to be good enough.
Yeah, if I could second that whole sentiment, which is that if you do something that you love, right, and then you provide your value as an employee, and if they, as the employer, don't pick up on that you're going above and beyond and that you're adding the value to the company and everything, well, then that's on them if they're not picking up on it, and that's not on you. And you shouldn't be killing yourself or doing these things to yourself that are unhealthy and put you in a bad place.
And I think maybe it's generational, but younger generations aren't really gonna take certain things from workplaces. Like, we're looking for more of an equitable workspace and work environment and treatment. So I'm straight up with I have Marfan's. I know it's an invisible condition, which is hard. Like Leah said, people don't know what it is right away, right? But I explain what it is. And I ask, what is the work-life balance? Because I am going to be needing a lot of times to go see doctors. I am going to be needing time for this and that. I will give you the best of me. I'm a really good employee. You can look at my references, but I will not lose my health, my sanity, and I will also not put my life on hold for you. At the end of the day, it is what it is. You are a number to most companies. So for me, my life, my work, and my health is more important than any job.
Thank you for adding that. I really like where the original question came from on Kyle's part. So I would love to hear something from each of you in terms of, we asked Leah, how do you stay positive in the face of all that with the work, or how do you remain a good employee? And obviously you work hard. But if we were to go back a little bit to the mental health aspect, and Adrianna mentioned, maybe it's a bike ride, or maybe it's journaling or drawing or sitting down and strumming a guitar, or whatever it may be. Can each of you share that one thing? I know you've probably got a dozen, but for the sake of the conversation and time, Kristy, I'm gonna kick it off with you. But do you mind sharing whether it's a walk in the park with your husband, or what is that one thing that's kind of your go-to to keep yourself in a mentally healthy spot?
Yeah, well, I'm a painter by trade, so oil painter. So I don't just like paint to express pain or anything like that. It's just not how it works for me. But when I need to be alone and I'm not just going to go to bed, I usually need music, and then I go for a walk by myself. But I need music, whatever I'm doing. It has got to be headphones on and then out the door.
All right, music is your catalyst. I like it.
I keep busy. I just keep busy. Like I, call friends, go out, go find out what the newest restaurants look like. Do a me day where like I'm gonna go get a massage, which is actually really helpful for my back because it's always aching. And go get my hair done. So I have a lot of different things that I do, but it's basically like keeping busy.
What would you say was, I imagine 2020 was hard. A lot of those things that you mentioned, they were closed. So what were you able to do? How did you stay busy over the last, 18 months or whatever it's been?
I worked a lot, and I had, instead of going out for a facial, I had my own little clay masks that I would do.
Nice.
And
Kyle does those all the time.
And taking walks with my dog, cleaning the house, talking to my parents on the phone, things like that.
Yeah. Awesome. And Micah, we know part of your answer is going to be a new baby. But what is something you and or your wife might do to stay sane in the midst of family and health?
So I will throw my wife under the bus and say that her mental health therapy is she's a marathon runner. And so she goes and takes out her worldly frustrations on the pavement. I am not that person. And the way that I deal with it and try to get that like me time is two polar opposite things. One, very similar to what's said before, is like I like to get away with like friends and be in social environments. That it kind of takes your mind off of your things and what you're doing. And then the other is to be purely alone, like walking the dog or going for a hike or going camping, and like getting away from I work in technology, so getting away from like all the internet and computers and all that kind of stuff. So it's the two polar opposites is really what resets my engine.
I love that you mentioned just hanging out with friends. We've joked before, we don't always want to talk about Friedrich's ataxia. We just want to talk about that new car we like, or our favorite Netflix show, or that new burger joint or whatever it may be, and that tends to help quite a bit. Leah, I'm going to throw it to you. I know we talked specifically about the workplace, but is there anything you do in your home life or free time to stay in a positive spot?
Yeah, I think a good bit of advice is to stay close to happy. So whatever you can do to be happy, that's the kind of my guiding light. And I'm unapologetic about it. So there's so many things you could say that's not responsible, but I have to deal with this. I want to be happy. So what I do is I'm big into architecture and home design. So I'm taking a class at the New York School of Interior Design right now. I work with a lot of the architects and designers in my hometown on community projects, and have made a lot of contacts through that. And I like to entertain and host and go out for dinner and try new things. So yeah, I just do whatever will make me happy.
And you said you're in Boston, is that right? Because I'm
New
just
Jersey.
trying. New
I'm in New Jersey.
Jersey, okay. Because you like to host, so we're gonna
If you're
show
ever
up for
in New
dinner,
Jersey,
man.
feel free to come by.
It's clear that everyone here has a lot more in their life than their condition, and I absolutely love that. I think of Friedrich's ataxia as almost a separate entity from me. Like, FA comes with me everywhere I go, no doubt, but that is not me. And when we connect like this, we're not connecting because okay, fine. The reason we are all coming together is that we have rare disease. But the reason we can connect is because we're people that are thinking beyond our conditions, and we're thinking about real things in life. And I really appreciate connecting with all of you today in that respect.
I would like to close out with a bit of advice from you guys for the viewers and listeners today. We've talked different walks of life, and Kristy, all the way back to being 5 years old when things started to unfold kind of dramatically for you. For somebody that maybe is early on in their diagnosis or on their journey, they're just starting, or they're, maybe like Leah, it's only been a couple of years or not long. What's some advice you would give to somebody that has maybe found themselves in this pond all of a sudden? And if you don't mind, I'm going to kick it off with Kristy.
Sure. Well, I have mentored quite a few young people with VEDS, and I always say VEDS is just a small part of who you are. Like, I think I'm hilarious, and that's a way bigger part of me than VEDS. So, but for somebody newly diagnosed too, there's such a grief process that happens, and it's the same process whether you lose a parent or a life that you thought you were going to live. Like Sean said, my trajectory of my life completely changed after my dad died. And you just have to know there's so much out there. There's so much for you to do and explore and be part of. And allow yourself to really grieve and go through all of those emotions. There's a lot of anger in that grief. There's a lot of devastation, and keep working it through. It gets better. It does get better.
That is a powerful statement. It is helpful to face a bit of reality, but also having a little bit of hope in your back pocket. Other people have made it through it. It's going to get better. It's going to be hard, but there's good on the other side. Adrianna, would you mind speaking to think about that new person or young person or whatever point they are in life, new to the journey?
Yeah. So that wasn't my journey, right? So I couldn't imagine, having that discovery at a later age and what that really would feel like. But something that I like to live with is really like knowing how lucky I am and how much privilege I have, even within my diagnosis, just knowing that others aren't as lucky, that others are suffering more than I am, that there are conditions where the science hasn't developed as much as with ours. Just knowing that even if it's bad, it could always be worse. I don't know if that helps, but that does help me, because I feel like, you know what? It isn't the end of the world. It is, there's people dealing with way worse things right now. I just have to go to the doctor, listen, do what I'm supposed to do. Things will get better. Things will be okay. It's not the end of the world. There's a lot of us that live with this on a day-to-day basis. Yes, it sucks. Yes, do I wish I could click my heels and not have it? Of course. but I have a great husband. I'm alive. I can dance. So I try to just live in the what I do have and what I can do versus what I don't have and what I can't do.
One of the things you said is, you just got to go to the doctor and figure these things out. And I think that's a really big part of living beyond your circumstances, taking care of those fundamentals. And then you can get to your husband and your dancing and all the great stuff after you take care of your health and take care of yourself.
Yeah. And the great thing is that there are answers. This isn't something where nothing can be done. There is something that can be done. And that's the great thing about it. Yeah.
All right, Leah, is there advice that you could share?
Yeah. So since we got on this call, I've been thinking, I think that you all are very lucky in that you've had so much time to deal or to learn how you're going to live with your condition. It's priceless. Treasure that. My life would be completely different had I had the diagnosis before the age of 30. And I'm still coming to terms with what all that all means. It is angering, and it does feel like you're on an island, and I'm working through it. But for anyone who's been diagnosed, I would say I agree with everyone. Live your life to the fullest, no matter what. You should always try your best to be happy. And I have a great life. Even with Loeys-Dietz syndrome, I have a really good life. So you just can't let it, I think we've been saying this the whole time, you can't let it get you down or define you or stop you from living and actualizing your full self and what your life's meant to be. But for anyone who's just been diagnosed, and especially I'm just speaking to all the families of those people, stick with it, stick with them, learn alongside them. Don't stick your head in the sand. It doesn't help anybody. And then because there's so many resources out there nowadays, because there's community, because there's the internet, you're not alone. And I'm so grateful to have just met people who are on this call today, because we all have each other's email addresses, and we should all feel free to reach out to each other and chat if we need to or want to, or we're in the area, or we just have a question. So I would just say, don't be afraid of it. Learn as much as you can and figure out how it's going to fit into your already awesome life.
Leah, you say that, you just joined this community, but I can see that you're already providing so much value just from the words you say and just the way you connect to other people. I'm getting a little emotional thinking about it, because I just value community so much, and you're already being a huge contributor to the community.
Thank you.
So, Micah, do you have any advice for that newly diagnosed family or individual that's pretty new on their journey?
Yeah, so any diagnosis is truly a big pill to swallow, right? It's devastating on so many levels. It's isolating, it's overwhelming, and in many ways, it's natural to completely shut down. I've been fortunate in that I've essentially grown up with the Marfan's community. I went to my first conference like over 20 years ago, and I've been hooked ever since. And so what I would say to anyone who is newly diagnosed is to not go down the rabbit hole of WebMD and searching the internet, the dark corners of the internet for all of the terrible outcomes that can come along with it. And instead, I would say, take advantage of the knowledge and the resources that exist within the Marfan community. So that is the individuals who look like you, who are going through the exact same issues as you, that you've never met before, but they exist. They're there. And many of them have opened their doors and are willing to talk to you at a drop of a dime. The entire community, Marfan's Foundation, has been set up and has the names of all the doctors and the clinics and the, everyone that you would need to go to if you needed to go to anyone. And that resource exists and is there at your fingertips with a phone call or an email. They are wonderful people who have dedicated their entire lives to this. So you are not alone in this. You are not an island. You are not isolated. And your news may be devastated. But if you just take a minute and just take a breath and go to the resources that they're there for this specific reason, to indoctrinate, to bring you in to the community, to make those introductions, to get you started down the right path, towards the right doctors, towards the right knowledge. You can go down those dark holes of the internet if you want, but do that later. Do that once you already know the things that, like, where you are and where you're settled. So that's what I would say, is take advantage of the resources and the Marfan Foundation, because they're really there to help you.
It's obvious that the four of you have so much to share, even if you don't know it or realize it or think you could. I feel that my perspective on life has been tweaked a little bit or spoken to just in this conversation alone. So again, I'm really grateful that you guys have spoken openly, that you agreed to get on the phone with Kyle and I and be a part of this event. And I feel like my life is richer because I'm connected to you guys and those that are watching today. And I trust that you've spoken positively to many people that have chimed in today or have watched today. So thank you for allowing Kyle and I to direct this conversation and connect with you guys as well. You're powerful, and we're happy to know you.
After this recording, Sean and the panelists were able to join the conference for a short live Q&A. The flood of comments during the Q&A made it obvious just how powerful it is to share your journey. Adrianna, Kristy, Leah, and Micah shared in such a way that resonated deeply. And that's what community is all about. So many of us are up against some of the most challenging odds. Limited or no treatments and no cures. Although we're moving in the right direction with some of the greatest minds in medicine and research, the way in which we as patients share our experiences and encourage one another is the fuel to our daily pursuits. Please be sure to check our show notes for a link to the video of this session and visit marfan.org for more information and resources for Marfan, Veds, and Lois Dietz. Sean and I are grateful to the Marfan Foundation and community for this experience, and we're grateful that you've listened today. We look forward to many more conversations as enriching as this one, and until then, keep living with urgency. Thank you for listening to the Two Disabled Dudes podcast. This show is possible with your support. Visit twodisableddudes.com to donate.
Connect with us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast app.